So welcome to this month's Savvy Series webinar. We're discussing handling emotions and how to stay calm and cool and collected whenever you are put into either stressful situations or a whole host of other opportunities that you find yourself in, whether from work situations or home, volunteer, you name it. And so hopefully from today's webinar you will learn quite a few tactics for how to manage those. We'll go through exactly what are emotions, how to express them, how to start filtering what you're doing in terms of emotions, and how to manage responses, and how to understand emotions that come from other people so that you also know how to manage your feedback and how you respond. So please feel free to ask questions at any time in the chat box or in the questions box. I'll be watching those the entire time. I'll also post 3 questions during the webinar to get your response so that I know that you're engaged. And that's if you are looking to receive CPE credit. If you're not wanting to get CPE credit, you don't have to answer, but I would like your answers. If you do want to share them, I would appreciate them, and that's a requirement of NASBA so we can offer credit for your session. And when we have those, please type your response into the questions box or the chat box, and I'll be tracking those responses and your attendance so I can send you credit within 2 weeks. So for those who are new to our Savvy Series and the Savvy Series webinars, it really was an idea around helping women specifically, but I know we've got both men and women that attend these, to help individuals build critical competencies for success. And I have a little graphic that says soft skills, but I think it goes much more, or goes a lot farther than that term and what we kind of infer soft skills to mean. And so that's why I like to say savviness, because there are so many different skills that could really make or break your career, and they fall in a lot of different categories. And I think soft skills get a bad rep just from the word soft and our inherent understanding of that word. So you probably heard, like, say, success skills or savviness versus the technical. And so this is really to offset, for all the technical education that you get to do your job day in and day out. These webinars are meant to offset that and meant to complement them. So let's dive into emotions. And this goes far beyond being, say, in a good mood or a bad mood. It's much more involved than that. So when we say emotions, there are a wide variety of things that encompasses. And when you look at emotional intelligence, which is different than emotions, but when you look at emotional intelligence, is really being able to understand emotions that are being displayed by someone else. That's from Goleman, ability to identify, assess, and control the emotions of oneself, of others, or groups. You also, in terms of at least starting to understand emotions, you also have to ask yourself, how well do you understand and manage your own personal emotions? And then also, are you sensitive to others in terms of when someone is, say, crying or is mad? Can you tell that they are having a hard time because you can read them, or can you not? And you actually acknowledge that this may be a skill that you need to hone in on. So those are some good questions to ask yourself when it comes to emotions. And emotions are made up of many facets, and we'll go through some of those. Those are physiological and nonverbal and some others. And we'll start with the physiological changes that happen when you get some sort of emotion, positive or negative, and you can actually feel your blood pressure rising. You can feel your heartbeat raise or increase. You can feel an increase in adrenaline. Sometimes with certain emotions, you may get an elevated blood sugar level. Now, of course, you may not be able to test it right then and there, but also some emotions can slow your digestion and make your stomach feel a little woozy. Another thing that can really happen in terms of physiological changes to a person whenever they're experiencing, say, stress, you've also got cortisol, which will not allow you essentially to, well, it retains fat cells. And who wants to have those? So when it comes to emotions, there are a lot of things that are going on that are not just mental, that are your body that responding to what you're experiencing. So keep those in mind in terms of how you want to manage those. But you've also got a lot of nonverbal emotion, like whenever somebody is expressing emotion, like this man here, he looks happy because he is smiling. You can see observable changes in people, their eyebrows raised, there's a tweak in their mouth, there could be looking down. So whenever somebody is experiencing an emotion, you can also watch those nonverbal cues. And in terms of how you respond back to some people, sometimes your own nonverbal behavior can be influenced by emotions of someone else. And you can also have a connection between the verbal emotions and the nonverbal reactions. So if somebody is sad and telling you this sad story, but they're also frowning or crying, those go in combination with each other. And so obviously we know the simple ones of, say, you know what somebody looks like when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're anxious. And I laugh because I think sometimes, and I think Apple's made this really easy for us now in terms of looking at certain words, and then emoticons pop up that you can select that actually go to those words. So sometimes I think if you have trouble understanding what somebody is trying to portray, you can just go back to emoticons and see which emoticon or facial expression you're supposed to have with a certain emotion. And we also have to look at how the mind impacts how we feel when it comes to emotions. So we have cognitive interpretations of emotions. And essentially what that is bodily components of most emotions are very similar, how your smile matches up with being happy. That's just one example. One thing that I like to relate this to, and I've got pictures kind of switched, but athletes do this with pre-game stress and you get jitters, or if you are getting ready to talk in front of a crowd and you get jitters. You can either use that to your benefit or it can be crippling. And if you use it to your advantage and envisioning, say, a win or seeing yourself succeed, and or even, say, making a journal note to yourself of yes, we can do this. All of that is part of being able to handle those emotions as well. You've also got, of course, verbal expression, which makes emotions a little bit easier to understand in terms of somebody literally just telling you how they are feeling, whether you've asked them or not. And so we use certain words to represent intensity. Instead of saying I'm mad, I'm infuriated. There's a difference there. So whenever you're thinking about how you want to manage certain emotions, maybe some that you think you're not handling very well now, what are some of the words that you can better use or describe how you're feeling? And what's interesting is we can't always rely on the perceptiveness of other people that they understand, or to ensure that they're understanding what you are feeling. So, and that all goes towards emotional intelligence. And if somebody has, say, a low emotional intelligence score, that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's just that they have a harder time understanding emotions. And I think one of the best examples, if you're looking towards a person or a character to personify a lack of or a lower emotional intelligence, is Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. He has a really hard time being able to tell between sarcasm and when somebody is upset, when somebody is happy. And I think that's one of the most perfect examples of someone that has an issue of understanding someone's emotions and being able to interpret what somebody else is feeling. That's why he has to ask someone else, was that someone being ticked off? Was that someone not liking what I said? You know, those kinds of things he has to check with somebody else. So if you have ever taken like an emotional intelligence course, or even some EQ surveys or inventories, it might be something that you want to look at pursuing, and if you want to better understand what emotional intelligence is in terms of reading emotions of other people. We also have that for our AFWA members and even non-members. We'll be doing emotional intelligence. We've got some recordings of those as well that you can, we actually did emotional intelligence last month, but if you missed that, we can always share those recordings with you, and they're also available to members on the member portal. So I have our first CPE check-in question. What is the emotion that you have the hardest time managing right now? Whether you feel like it's a hard thing to manage because you don't want it to be expressed in the workplace, or somebody's taking advantage of that emotion. What is the emotion that is giving you the hardest time in terms of managing it? So if you put your answer in the questions box or the chat box, either one, we'll be able to make sure you get CPE credit. And even if you're not here for CPE credit, your answers are very interesting, so please do share those as well. And I'll give you just a few more seconds to answer that one. Some really good ones: anger, frustration, irritation. If you are in tax, I'm sure some of you are either very irritated or anxious about an upcoming deadline. Okay, thank you for sharing those. So let's look at, now that we kind of understand the underpinnings of emotions, let's look more at what influences emotional expression, which is a lot of things. When you look at just your personality, you know, your personality is a very powerful force, but it doesn't have to govern all of what you are communicating. And typically the way we like to express emotions in kind of a low threat way is people will turn to email or IM or chat rooms to where they don't have to express that emotion to someone's face. So it also has to go along with the personality of other people. You know, do you allow someone to govern your feelings in a positive or negative way? But personality goes a lot towards, you know, how you manage a variety of emotions and what you show to other people. But also culture, and there's been some interesting research done on culture and how that affects emotions, and it kind of goes without saying that similar events generate different feelings in different cultures. And also what research has shown us, which I find this very interesting, people in warmer climates are more emotionally expressive. That's just per research. Also, I think this even feeds into a stereotype sometimes. People from the southern part of countries are more emotionally expressive than northerners. Have no idea why, but that's what research is also telling us. When you look at individualistic cultures, so essentially, say the American culture, that is more individualistic, as opposed to collective cultures. Say a lot of Asian cultures are collective, in that you do a lot of communication in very small in-groups, or in groups that stick together for longer periods of time. So we also look at, in terms of culture, ethnicity, and that can also impact how we express emotion, how we share feelings. And then there's, of course, gender, and this is kind of where I don't want to get on a soapbox necessarily, but the whole workplace conversation of gender and women and emotions and, oh, women are so emotional. I don't think, and I completely disagree with it, so I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think sometimes women are better at least communicating or expressing emotion, even if they don't notice that they are, but they are certainly more or have the higher ability to do that. So what's interesting is research does tell us there is quite a difference. And I think this is probably not a surprise to anyone that fathers mask emotions more than mothers. And what's really interesting is when you take the face-to-face interaction out, like say via the internet, there are the same differences between male and female emotional expressiveness. So there really is some truth to the cultural stereotype of the inexpressive male and the demonstrative female. But also what is interesting with research has shown us that some men, not all, are emotionally expressive later in life, whether that's because of family or other commitments or just life experiences. That also changes. So in getting past gender, we've also got social conventions, or what people assume we should do in terms of expressing emotions. So I think really in the U.S., and I think this is still true to some degree, we really have some unwritten rules of communication that discourage us from sharing emotions, especially in the workplace. So then I think sometimes we get surprised or shocked when someone expresses, say, a lot of sadness in the workplace, because that's not necessarily always the norm for us. You don't see that a lot. We also have a social convention, or kind of an unwritten social rule, that we are threatened in the face. We don't want to essentially lose face by sharing emotions. So as soon as you start sharing emotions at work, how does that affect someone's respect of you or understanding of your role, if you will? And sometimes expression of emotions can be limited to, say, requirements of social roles or your line of work. Or I think we have sometimes the assumption that, say, nurses or doctors are supposed to have more empathy or show more emotion when somebody gets, good results or bad results, whereas you might be in a role, say, as an engineer, and there's an assumption that you may not express as many emotions in that line of work just because of your day-to-day work. And so really social rules even discourage too much expression of positive feelings. It's almost like if we celebrate too much, we're afraid of what that will do to other people's perception of it. And we also have to recognize that and act on certain emotions, and if we don't, that decreases, like, our ability to react and recognize. If you pull yourself out of certain situations, you will lose some of that ability. It's like any other skill. If you're not using it, you lose it. And so we actually have to, whether we recognize it like consciously, we are working on our ability to read emotions and to understand other people. We have a good question from Gloria. What about global social conventions and roles? And actually, there's one of my favorite books. I think it's Bow, Shake Hands, or Curtsy. I'll have to look that one up and email it to you. That actually goes through different cultures and how that relates to how you share not only emotions but greetings and interactions. That's one I would recommend for that one, because there are so many things that change now. Now, I think that has been different, or it has changed at least in some way, shape, or form in a lot of different global settings, whether that's business, or yes, bow, kiss, and shake hands. That is one of my favorite resources. Thanks, Gloria. In terms of looking at social conventions in terms of different countries and different experiences around the world. But it certainly is, if you find yourself in a situation that is very different from the one that you normally day-to-day find yourself in, it certainly is behooving of someone to go and look up social conventions and rules and what is expected of an individual in certain cultures, whether it's for fun or for work. Another thing that I like to mention is like fear of self-disclosure, and essentially it's making ourselves a little bit more vulnerable in terms of what we share with people. And it's interesting because sometimes, especially in professional settings, emotional disclosure can be a little risky. And sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. It can work to your advantage if, disclosing something about how you feel towards a certain situation to a coworker, maybe they'll be completely elated that you said something because they feel the same way. But also emotional honesty might make others uncomfortable in the workplace. So that certainly is something you have to think about before you decide to share frustration or share other feelings that may be outside the workforce or outside your workplace, your day-to-day, but are affecting how you perform at work. And of course, if others are misreading your emotions, they might misunderstand what you're trying to say, and that could ultimately affect a business decision, or even promotions or additions. Things like that may actually be harmful. And I think this is our biggest fear and why we don't self-disclose emotions, especially at work. But I think it also happens more so in dating relationships or just meeting somebody, whether it's personal or professional. We are scared of sharing that emotional honesty because it can be used against us in a variety of ways. And I think we find ourselves, say, self-disclosing to a peer, but not self-disclosing to, say, your supervisor or your employer. And one last component is emotional cognition. And what's interesting is, and by definition, this is the process by which emotions are transferred from one person to another. So whenever somebody is ticked off and all of a sudden the entire group is feeling the same way, and really that process can occur really quickly without any or very little verbal communication. Just the way that you present yourself or your own presence within a group, that may start to affect other people. So it certainly is something that if you have a hard time managing, say, anxiety, maybe that's something that if you can read it in another person, you stay away from that person in certain situations, because it just makes your anxiety even harder to manage or control, or also not, essentially share with other people in that self-disclosure piece. So whenever you can start to read someone else's emotion, you have to really make the conscious decision around, do you interact with that person, or do you, politely walk away so that you aren't experiencing that same emotion if you, don't care to. So also something really to think about when it comes to emotions. So I have our second CPE question, and this, and I'm hoping everybody on here is a member of an association of subtype, whether you're an AFWA member or not. One thing that we would like to get your feedback on is member benefit. So what is the best member benefit that you could receive or would like to receive from an association that you belong to? And if you missed the first question was, what is the emotion that you have the hardest time managing? So if you missed the first one. And our current one, what is the best member benefit that you could receive from an association that you currently belong to, or AFWA if you belong to AFWA? And if you missed the first question, the first check-in question was, what is the emotion that you have the hardest time managing? I'll give you a few more seconds to respond to that. All right. So our third section is all about expressing emotion and how to go about doing that. So let's look at a few guidelines. And actually, sharing emotions, whether they're positive or negative, improves relationships. And in fact, research shows us that people who share feelings or what they're thinking are healthier. And people who overexpress feelings, that could be a negative piece to your well-being. And so what's really the best rule to live by is to learn how to express emotions constructively. So if you know you're going to have an issue managing, say, anger, and you know certain people or events trigger that anger, do you walk away? Do you excuse yourself for a minute and start to think about, how you respond to that? There are a variety of ways to do that. And so if you're able to start expressing emotions a little bit more constructively to where you know what your end goal is for doing that, you will find much more success in those situations. So what you have to do first, of course, is recognize what you're feeling. So you have to be aware of your feelings in terms of how you identify them. There's a couple of, you can actually Google emotional inventory, and it will give you a whole bunch of emotions and the words that are used to describe them. So if you're having a hard time understanding like how to describe something, you're not able to even verbalize what it is you're feeling, go pull one of those lists and see if there's a word that's really descriptive of what you're feeling. Also look at, say, the physiological changes in nonverbal behaviors that you have. When you're really irritated, do you eat junk food? When you're anxious, do you tend to be sleepy or not be able to sleep? One or the other. So I think this is really the opportunity to, whether you do it on a calendar, you take notes every day for yourself, write yourself a little quick note, and you can actually make sure that you're monitoring day to day how things are making you feel and what is that doing to your stomach, your sleep. Are you getting headaches? Are you jittery? Always make notes of that. And then also recognize the thoughts and verbal messages that you're sending to others and being cognizant of word choice or tone, especially if you're trying to convey something by email or nonverbal, like you're writing or texting somebody. You also have to be cognizant of the things that you're sharing in that realm because you're unable to see tone or hear tone whenever you're communicating that way. So it's definitely something to think about whenever you're trying to recognize how you're conveying feelings. And what I've started to do, I'm not a fan of bullet journals, but I am a fan of a couple things from them, and one of them being like a habit tracker and a wellness tracker. So if you're more of a paper person like I am, it's certainly helpful to like have those all laid out and say, you know, I was feeling tired on this day and feeling tired on that day. Oh, that's because 2 days before that I was really stressed out about a deadline. So being able to keep track like that and know that when you get stressed out, that leads to you being tired afterward. What can you do to improve that situation? Do you make sure you go to bed at a certain time rather than dragging something out? Do you change your diet for those stressful situations? What do you do to counteract that being tired because it's triggered by a stressful situation? And when we look at emotions and expressing them, a lot goes into your language or word choice. And what's interesting anymore is that we have a smaller vocabulary than previous generations in terms of words to express how we're feeling, rather than, you know, just saying mad, sad, frustrated, lonely. There are a lot of other words that can go about describing it. And so when I mentioned that emotional inventory, maybe I'll download one of those and just send it to everybody who's on so that you have it. It's kind of like a word a day and trying to pick or choose or learn words that are better descriptors. So in terms of improving them, you know, you can certainly say in single words, I'm angry, but if you are more descriptive, it also can help someone in terms understand how you're feeling, for one, and two, try to help you through it if you want them to, of course. So you can certainly use more descriptive language like my stomach is tied in knots. You know, my head is killing me because I'm not going to be able to meet this deadline, kind of thing. And you really have to make it clear that your feelings are centered on specific circumstances, like something specific has triggered anger or anxiety, rather than the whole relationship or the whole context. So certainly language can be helpful if somebody is not understanding of what you're experiencing, what you're going through. Here's some other tips for expressing emotions. Always think about sharing multiple feelings. So essentially what I mean by that is sharing emotions of different types that, in different circumstances, not just when you're ticked off or not just when you're happy, because then the assumption is by other people, or could be by other people, that, oh, well, they're never happy. Oh my gosh, I don't want to be around that person. Or if you're always, only sharing happy emotions or things that you're enthusiastic about, do people start assuming that some of it's fake because you can't express a different emotion? So recognize that there are different emotions, and if you're only sharing one type, there are effects for that. Also, recognize the difference between feeling and acting. And you certainly can feel one way and act another. It's really hiding emotions or masking emotions. So it's certainly something to be cognizant of in how you are sharing or expressing feelings, and it depends on the context. Office, work, family, all of those are going to be different. And also, use I statements whenever you are sharing something with someone, a peer, coworker, so that the other person knows that you're owning what you're saying, that you are cognizant of what you're communicating. And last but not least, there's always a time and place for everything. So, you know, certain emotions, definitely, if you're excited, say, about a new business prospect, is it always the best time to share that at a family dinner where your cousin is getting laid off or something like that? So even when things are positive, a positive emotion or feeling, maybe it's not the right time or place. So it definitely is something to think about in terms of how your feelings are or your news is accepted because of the circumstances at that time. So here's a few tips in terms of difficult emotions. And I say difficult are the ones that are a lot more debilitative. So when you can look at emotions, there are really some that are positive and negative, or if you want a little bit more descriptive term, facilitative or debilitative. When I say facilitative, and I mean, you know, positive emotions, things that can contribute to effective functioning, like getting prepared for a game and you're nervous, or you're nervous before you speak before you're in front of a group. Those can be times where you can use emotion to improve what you're doing. Whereas debilitative, you know, the ones where you just want to crawl right back into bed after you've gotten off a phone call, those are the ones that we have a little bit more difficulty with and take a little bit more time to manage, and also take a lot of recognition of what you're experiencing and why to be able to manage them. And there really is truth to the whole saying of mind over matter, and how emotions can cause feelings. So when you have, you know, a time where you just are saying, you know, I can't get this done, or I'm not good at doing this, or there's just no way I can finish this. If you are changing the thought process around what you're doing to one that, say, for that situation is much more positive, that will start to change your emotions around, say, the work that you're doing. You feel like you can't accomplish it. Even just seeing, and that's why I think there's so much business in terms of looking at affirmations, or seeing them on, you know, walls, or hearing them. And some people think they might be hokey, but, you know, if it's something that you can start to change your thoughts around specific things that you're doing, it can actually be much more productive. And it's one of those things that we refer to as like self-talk, or you know, how you are essentially like self-deprecating language, like, oh, I'm not good at that, or there's no way I can accomplish this. I don't have the skill set to do that. I'm not strong enough to do that. All of that can go toward, you know, feelings of anxiety, or feelings that you're not going to be able to improve or move forward or succeed. So there is a lot of valid thinking in terms of, if you look at words and start changing your thought processes, that will change your emotions. Here's just one example. It's pretty simple, bullying example of having, you know, certain names, like being called at you. So kids, you know, can be like the worst at that, and hearing terrible nicknames. But the negative self-talk on that is that you've done something to cause that, as opposed to there's something wrong with the other person. And so once you start accepting or thinking that, you know, I've done something wrong, you're not only building in, say, feelings of angst, hurt, sad, but then what's the chain reaction of that? does that person then decide that they're no longer going to be part of a certain group, or grades start falling, they start hanging out with different people, what have you. So you have to start thinking about in terms of like your self-talk, why are you saying that about yourself, and is it really something that you even believe? You have to really consider the activating event and the consequential emotion to be able to start to change your thought process or your paradigm around that activating event. So when we think about debilitative feelings, or the ones that, again, make us want to crawl back in bed before we even get started in the day, they come from a lot of fallacies. And I've got a long list here, and I'll go over a couple of them. So the fallacy of perfection. Human beings are not perfect. I'll be the first to admit that perfectionist tendencies are like sometimes the biggest waste of time ever. And so sometimes, and not in all situations, but sometimes good enough is good. Good enough is going to be acceptable. Another one of the fallacy of helplessness. Yes, people can have very valid helplessness feelings, but if you are causing your own feelings of helplessness, why? Can you pull yourself out of a certain situation? Absolutely. You can say no. And so if you have that fallacy or that debilitative thinking that's illogical in terms of, well, I can't do this, that certainly is going to be one that I think a lot of people are going to be working through. The fallacy of approval, like, you can't, so like, just as an example, showing no emotion, as if like showing no emotion will only be what gets you to a certain, say, status, or you're only going to get approval, say, from a parent if you're doing X, Y, Z, or you're not sharing these emotions, or you're only happy, like, I guess probably a different example, or popular culture, like the Stepford Wives. There are certain emotions that are being portrayed and as a total fallacy for a lot of different for reasons. And Amanda just posted a good point, the power of no. And one thing I always say is, no is a complete sentence. Now, do I always follow that rule myself? No, but I have gotten better at the rule of no is a complete sentence. So it certainly is also one that'll be helpful in managing emotions in terms of being overwhelmed. Those of us who have helium hands or say yes to everything are the ones that are going to feel a lot of feelings of, say, perfectionism or being overwhelmed. So how can we minimize some of these debilitative or negative self-talk aside from, say, seeing affirmations? Actually note when you are frustrated, when you're irritated, when you're anxious, when you're stressed, when you're happy, when you're sad. So that's certainly something is, if you're able to track those and also understand the events that go into creating those emotions, then you know how to respond. So when you are writing down notes to yourself and recording so you can keep track, think of or make note of these few things. Are there specific people that are triggering certain emotions? Types of individuals, say a certain group of coworkers or supervisors, or say your sister. Those can all be individual or types of people. Also settings, are there types of groups that cause you stress, or say locations that are not conducive to either positive emotions or giving you the capability of having a conversation And also, are there certain topics that cause different emotions? Say, a lot of people get frustrated or anxious in talking about money and talking about their say their own financial plans, and or in the world of fundraising, it was for a long time kind of like taboo to talk about like planned gifts and end of life plans. I think a lot of that's changed, but again, that topic of conversation causes a lot of emotions in terms of sadness, or for the person who's trying to make plans, anxiety, or even the family members that are having to sit and listen to said plans, anxiety. So make note of the kinds of topics or certain types of conversations that are causing individual and specific emotions. Also record your self-talk. If there are certain things that are really bugging me, I'll write them down. I may not get to them that day, but I at least have noted it so I don't forget it. For me, if it's not written down, out of sight, out of mind. So if you're hoping to change some of those negative self-talk or changing how you respond to certain situations, write it down first, and then you can start to come up with plans to change those. And when we go back to those fallacies, that list of fallacies that we had, start thinking about how you can dispute your irrational beliefs. Going back to the whole perfectionism, perfectionism can be debilitating and a total waste of time sometimes, because you're not, some things are not just going to be perfect, and it's just not going to work out that way. Would I have said that to myself like 5 years ago? No. So you have to actually make a plan around some of those irrational beliefs, or you have to make a plan around some of the negative talk that you might be experiencing. Here are some actual quotes that you might consider. And of course, this is, a lot of people, this is how people will respond to essentially what I've just said. And so in terms of these objections to say, oh, it sounds phony, that's the one I hear. That's the one I used to say even to myself. Like, I can't just look at an affirmation and change how I feel, because that's just totally ridiculous and phony. So even if that's your own objection, if you're not allowing it to be, I guess, a useful tool, then there's not much anybody else can do to change that. But if that's the objection, you also have to look at why you think that. I was thinking it just because I didn't know anybody else that was doing that. It wasn't something that anybody talked about. We don't talk about affirmations or those kind of things. It just seems ridiculous. And I come to find out they can actually work. I think that was the whole concept of vision board. A lot of people were saying, oh, well, they don't work. They don't do what they're supposed to. Those are ridiculous. So sometimes you just have to be a little bit open to at least a suggestion of, and if it doesn't work out for you, it doesn't work out, and you find a different way. But certainly something to think about as you try to be cognizant of how you are managing a particular emotion. So I have one last check-in question. And so for our non-AFWA members, this could be for any association or group that you belong to. At the, say, a national level, what, going back to member benefits again, what could AFWA offer that you would use that's not already offered? Or if you do not belong to AFWA, think about the groups that you do belong to. What benefit isn't being offered that you would like to see? Or you can even answer that with what's the benefit that you get from one organization but say not another that you would like to see. Now, if you're here for CPE and you can't think of anything, you can also put in that you're not sure. just so I have your answer to the question. All right. All right, thank you for those answers. That will certainly be helpful for us here as we try to always expand member benefits when we can. So that is all the content I have today on emotions. I hope that that has been helpful and is information that you can put into use and put into practice. Next month, for our Savvy series, we have business writing, and so we'll go through an hour of how to be better at articulating what you mean in a business setting in business writing. So please feel free to join us in April for that, and you can also find a list of all of our webinars on our website as well. So I appreciate you all attending, and thank you for being here. If you have any further questions, please put those in the questions box, and I'll stick around here for a few moments to answer your questions. And if you don't have any questions, again, thank you for attending, and I hope you all have a phenomenal afternoon. So a good question, Gloria. Around sources, I mentioned Goleman, that starts with a G. Also, now I forget the authors of Emotional Intelligence and Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And then also from the course I used to teach on communication, there's a whole section on emotion, so I do pull from that. A good question from Amanda, how do I find out about upcoming seminars? We do have our monthly email that goes out to AFWA members, but we have plenty of non-AFWA members on that list as well. There is a sign up at afwa.org, or you can email me directly and I can have you put on that list. Then also we have the calendar of our webinars online at afwa.org. And if for some reason you can't find it, you can also feel free to email me. Good question. Do you offer any other language, other courses in other languages? Unfortunately, no, we do not. If I get back my Spanish skills one day, maybe we'll do something in Spanish. But no, all of them are in English. So if you do have any additional questions, please put those in the questions box, and I am happy to answer those. All right, well, seeing no additional questions, I will end our session for today. Thank you again for attending, and if you do have additional questions afterwards, after you've had time to think through today's content, please feel free to email me. at the address on the screen. And I hope you all have a great week. Thank you again so much for